Welcome to Story Medicine. I'm Joe Summerfield. For over 20 years, I've been working to better understand and support people in navigating this human experience, and I've come to believe that stories are encoded with the collective wisdom of all who have come before us, that they bring us into connection with the collective unconscious and contain treasure waiting to be decoded. This podcast explores traditional tales through that lens. Each episode offers a story told in full, an exploration of the medicine it may carry for us, and practices to help you integrate that medicine. Today's story comes from Hindu mythology, one of the great cosmological tales found in the ancient Puranas. It's called Samudra Manthana, the churning of the ocean. It carries medicine about what transformation actually requires of us, and what emerges when we're willing to do that work. Let's begin. Part 1. The Story. There was a time when the balance of the universe had been broken. It began with pride. Indra, king of the Devas, the celestial beings who uphold cosmic order, was riding his magnificent white elephant when he encountered the sage Durvasa. The sage, who had just received a sacred garland from a celestial nymph, offered it to Indra as a blessing. Indra accepted the gift and placed it on the trunk of his elephant, but the elephant, irritated by the strong scent of flowers, flung the garland to the ground and trampled it beneath his feet. Durvasa, a sage known for his fierce temper, saw disrespect in this careless act. "You have become drunk with your own strength, Indra," he said. "You believe yourself invincible. Very well, let us see how you fare without the power that you take for granted." And with those words, Durvasa cursed the Devas. All of the celestial beings would lose their strength, their vitality, and their divine radiance. It happened quickly. The Devas found themselves growing tired, diminished, and their rivals, the Asuras, powerful beings driven by ambition and the desire for dominion, sensed that weakness immediately. Led by King Bali, the Asuras attacked, and this time they won. The Asuras took control of the three worlds, heaven, earth, and the underworld. The Devas, defeated and desperate, fled to Vishnu, the great preserver, the one who maintains the cosmic balance when all seems lost. Vishnu listened to their plea, and then he spoke. "The only way to regain your strength is to obtain Amrita, the nectar of immortality. It lies at the bottom of the cosmic ocean, the great ocean of milk, but you cannot retrieve it alone. You are too weak now. You will need help." "Help?" Indra asked. "From whom?" "From the Asuras," Vishnu said. "You must make an alliance with those who defeated you. Together you will churn the ocean. Together you will bring forth what lies hidden in its depths. Propose that you will share the treasures equally." The Devas recoiled. Work alongside their conquerors? Share the nectar of immortality with those who had just seized their realm? But Vishnu's eyes held knowledge that they could not yet grasp. "Do as I say. I will ensure that cosmic balance is maintained." And so the Devas approached their conquerors. "We propose a truce," Indra said to Bali. "We will churn the ocean of milk together. Whatever emerges, the treasures, the nectar, we will divide equally between us." Bali, victorious and powerful, considered this. The Asuras were strong, but the promise of immortality, eternal power, that was worth the effort. Worth the temporary cooperation, at least. "Agreed," he said. They began to prepare. The ocean was vast beyond measure. They would need a churning rod powerful enough to stir those cosmic depths. They chose Mount Mandara, a massive mountain, as their rod. And for the rope to churn it, they sought out Vasuki, king of serpents, who dwelt coiled around Shiva's neck. Vasiku agreed to help, on the premise that he too would receive a share of what emerged. The Devas and the Asuras gathered on the shores of the ocean of milk. They uprooted Mount Mandara and carried it to the center of the ocean. But when they released it, the mountain began to sink. It was too heavy. There was no bottom to support it. In that moment, Vishnu transformed. His body became that of a great turtle, Kurma, his second avatar. He dived beneath the waters and positioned himself underneath the mountain, his vast shell becoming the foundation, the unmoving support for the churning to come. The Asuras, proud and powerful, insisted on holding the serpent Vasuki's head. "We will not take the lesser position," they declared. So the Devas took hold of Vasuki's tail without argument. Interestingly, in some tellings, despite the Asura's belief that the serpent's head was the more prestigious position, it actually resulted in them becoming weakened by the serpent's breath. In either case, the churning began. Back and forth they heaved, Devas pulling the tail, Asuras pulling the head. And the mountain rotated, grinding against Vishnu's shell, stirring the cosmic waters. The effort was immense. Many on both sides collapsed from exhaustion. Vishnu, riding on his eagle Garuda, revived all of them. The churning continued. For 1,000 years they churned, and then, from the depths, something began to emerge. The first thing that rose from the ocean was not treasure, it was poison. Halahala, the deadliest poison in existence. Dark and thick, it spread through the waters like a terrible cloud. Its fumes alone were enough to destroy all of creation. Both the Devas and the Asuras backed away in horror. If this poison spread, everything, all the worlds, all beings would be annihilated. It was Shiva who came to their rescue. The great Lord, dwelling in meditation on Mount Kailash, opened his eyes and saw the danger. Without hesitation, he gathered the poison and drank it down, all of it. The poison was so potent that it turned his throat blue. From that day forward, Shiva would be known as Nilakantha, the blue-throated one. He held the poison in his throat, neither swallowing it nor releasing it, containing destruction itself within his being. With the poison held, the churning resumed, and now the treasures began to appear. First came Kamdanu, the wish-fulfilling cow who grants abundance. Then Achchaishravas, the magnificent 7-headed white horse. Airavata emerged, a white elephant of extraordinary power. The Kaustuba gem rose from the waters, a jewel of incomparable radiance. Vishnu took it and placed it on his chest, where it would remain. The Kalpavriksha emerged, the wish-fulfilling tree. The Parijata tree followed, its blossoms never fading. Then came the Apsaras, the celestial dancers, beautiful beyond measure. And then, emerging from the churning waters like dawn itself, came Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, fortune, and cosmic order. She was radiant, her presence bringing prosperity and balance. She looked at all who were gathered there, Devas and Asuras alike, and chose Vishnu as her eternal consort, placing herself at his side. The moon rose next, Chandra, who would measure the cycles of time. And finally, after all of these treasures, came Dhanvantari, the divine physician. He emerged from the ocean carrying a pot. And in that pot was Amrita, the nectar of immortality. The moment the Asuras saw it, everything else vanished from their awareness. This was ultimate power. This is what they had been working toward. So they rushed forward and snatched the pot from Dhanvantari's hands and ran. The Devas, weakened and outnumbered, turned to Vishnu. And Vishnu transformed once more. This time he became Mohini, a woman of such extraordinary beauty that every Asura who looked at her forgot everything else. She was enchanting, captivating, and irresistible. "Brothers," she said to the Asuras, with her voice like music, "why are you fighting amongst yourselves over the nectar? Let me distribute it fairly between you. Sit in rows, you on one side, and the Devas on the other, and I will serve you all in turn." The Asuras, completely entranced, agreed immediately. They arranged themselves in neat rows with their eyes following Mohini's every movement. She walked amongst them with the pot, moving gracefully and slowly. But every drop she poured went to the devas. Every cup she filled was handed to those aligned with the cosmic order. The asuras watched her, mesmerized, not noticing that they were receiving nothing. One asura, however, Rahu, was clever enough to see through the enchantment. He disguised himself as a deva and sat amongst them. When Mohini served him, he drank the nectar quickly. But the sun and the moon, sitting nearby, recognized him, and they alerted Vishnu, and before the nectar could pass down Rahu's throat, before he could gain full immortality, Vishnu threw his discus, the Sudarshana chakra, and severed Rahu's head from his body. The head, having tasted immortality, lived on. The body became Ketu, and from that day forward, Rahu would chase the sun and the moon across the sky, occasionally catching them, creating the eclipses that we still witness today. By the time the asuras realized what had happened, it was too late. The devas had drunk all of the Amrita, and they had regained their strength, their power, and their immortality. Enraged, the asuras attacked. A great war was fought on the shores of the cosmic ocean. But now the devas, restored by the nectar, had the advantage. They fought back, and in the end the asuras retreated to the underworld. The balance of the cosmos was restored. The devas returned to heaven, and the order had returned to the three worlds. But the ocean had not finished giving up its secrets. Everything that had emerged during the churning, the poison and the treasures, and the goddess and the nectar, all of it remained, woven into the fabric of creation itself. Part 2. The Medicine. Let's explore the medicine that this story may be offering us. Before we explore deeper, if you know somebody who might appreciate this story's medicine right now, please share this episode with them. And if you're enjoying the podcast and would like to help others find it too, please consider subscribing and leaving a review. Thank you. So, the journey begins when the devas were stripped of their power, so let's look at how that came about. Indra didn't actively do something terrible, but he was careless. He took the sage's gift casually and placed it without thought on his elephant, and the elephant trampled it. It seems that the sage, the carrier of wisdom, recognized this as a sign of complacency. And in the sage's eyes, that was problematic and in need of immediate correction. Why? The devas hold great power, and power should always be accompanied by responsibility. The greater the power, whether through authority or knowledge, wealth or physical strength, the greater the potential consequences of our actions, and the less even the field is with others. So without responsibility, that increased capacity can lead to harm. For the devas, power and duty are bound together. They hold power because they carry the responsibility to maintain balance. So when the sage perceived that Indra, the king of the devas, had become complacent, the curse was not a punishment, but a correction. Perhaps this is a reminder to those of us holding power or privilege, which is all of us in some aspects or circumstances. How aware are we of those dynamics? And how do we hold ourselves and our power? So the devas, stripped of their power, come to Vishnu, defeated and desperate. Notice that he doesn't rescue them. He doesn't restore their power directly. He tells them, you must do the work yourselves. Not only that, but you must do it in collaboration with those who defeated you. So Vishnu is acting in alignment with the correction. This is profoundly humbling, and surely a part of the medicine of which Durvasa recognized they were in need. The devas must work with the asuras as equals, and they recoil at the prospect, believing the asuras are beneath them. But this is an essential part of the medicine, or the correction from complacency. You cannot recover dharmic power through domination or superiority. You recover it through relationship, through recognizing that the forces you've been in conflict with are necessary. Notice what Vishnu tells them about where the medicine lies, at the bottom of the cosmic ocean. This is a theme that we see across cultures. The answers to deep questions lie not on the surface within easy reach, but at the very bottom of the watery depths, in the depths of the unconscious. In this case, it isn't simply a personal descent as we see in other stories. This story tells us that we must churn. This is an alchemical process, working away at the raw material of milk, the undifferentiated potential, until something hidden and rich emerges, the butter. In order to do this, we must apply sustained effort, friction that requires opposing forces. So it is the tension of the forces in opposition that makes the transformation possible. And it takes as long as it takes, which in this story is 1,000 years, which in mythic time means longer than you want to, or longer than you would imagine, longer than feels bearable. So let's take a closer look at those opposing forces that create the necessary tension. In Hindu cosmology, Devas and Asuras both come from the same source, the creator Prajapati. They share the same origin. The distinction between the two isn't moral. It's not simply good versus bad or gods versus demons. It's about function and orientation. The Devas are aligned with Dharma, cosmic order, balance, the maintenance of structure. They define the ground. They hold responsibility for keeping things functioning. And they are held to high standards because they carry this duty. The Asuras, on the other hand, are driven by ambition, expansion, exploration. They push boundaries. They test limits. They seek dominion. They don't define the ground. They explore potential and expand what's conceivable. They explore possibility. Both are necessary for cosmic dynamism. Without the Devas' commitment to order, everything collapses into chaos. Without the Asuras' drive and expansion, order becomes rigid, stagnant, and oppressive. This is the same pattern that we've seen in other traditions. Order and chaos, structure and possibility, the charted and the uncharted. The tension between them is what creates life, what allows transformation. And we need both within ourselves. We need the part that maintains structure, that honors duty, that keeps things functioning, and we need the part that's ambitious, that pushes limits, that explores beyond the known. The medicine isn't to eliminate one in favor of the other, or to imagine that one is good and one is evil. It's to recognize that transformation requires both forces in dynamic relationship with one another, pulling in opposition. So the Devas and the Asuras gather at the ocean to begin this work. They choose Mount Mandara as the churning rod and Vasuki the serpent as the rope. But when they place the mountain in the ocean, it starts to sink. It's too heavy. There is no bottom to hold it. So Vishnu turns into Kurma avatar, the turtle. He dives beneath the waters and positions his shell as the foundation, the unmoving support beneath all the churning above. This is crucial symbolism, because Vishnu represents something different from the Devas and the Asuras, something foundational with integrity and neutral in orientation, something essential. Perhaps he represents the ground of our being itself, the unchanging presence beneath the ego's struggles, what Jung would call the self, the axis around which the ego rotates, but which itself remains steady, the part of us that is somehow transcendent of this lifetime's experience, but can hold and observe it. And the turtle is a perfect symbol for this. Hard shell on the outside, impenetrable, protected from the grinding friction above. Soft on the inside, compassionate, steady, and enduring. And of course the turtle withdraws into itself, like the yogic practice of turning inward to find the steady center. Perhaps there's an invitation here for all of us. When we are in the churning, when opposing forces within us are in tension, when we're engaged in the difficult work of transformation, perhaps we need to remember that there is a foundation beneath all of that isn't churning, and we can find peace and perspective in that place. As total as the ordeals of life might feel, there is a part of us that witnesses the struggle without being destroyed by it, or perhaps even touched by it. Like the turtle bearing the immense weight of the mountain for 1,000 years, holding steady beneath and providing the foundation for that process. The true self that can never be lost, the unchanging awareness that observes order and chaos without being either one. And this is what makes the churning possible. If we identify completely with the forces doing the work, if we believe that we are only the identities, the stories, the struggles, then we collapse. The mountain sinks. But if we're rooted in what's beneath, if we have access to that steady ground, then we can maintain the tension for as long as it takes. The foundation holds, and the churning begins. For 1,000 years they pull, Devas on the tail, Asuras on the head, back and forth. The effort is immense. Many collapse. Vishnu revives them, and the work continues. And then something begins to emerge from the depths. Not the treasure that they were looking for, but poison, one deadly enough to destroy everything. This is the story reflecting honestly about transformative work. When we start churning our psyche, stirring the depths, bringing up what's been suppressed, throwing into question the structures that we've come to accept and rely on, the first thing that surfaces isn't enlightenment. It's painful destruction. It's the rage we've been holding down, the grief we've avoided, the shame, the violence that we've kept unconscious, the crumbling of the way that we see ourselves and the world around us, of our protective mechanisms, of the shadow material that's been festering at the bottom. All of this is potent, and potentially, in order to evolve, we could be facing what may feel like total destruction before rebuilding. We can't minimize it or spiritually bypass it. It must be brought up, and something must metabolize it. And here Shiva appears. In Hindu cosmology, Shiva is part of the Trimurti. Brahma creates, Vishnu preserves, and Shiva destroys. But Shiva's destruction isn't malevolent. It's the necessary dissolution that allows new creation to begin. Shiva is associated with meditation, asceticism. His function is to encounter what needs to end and transform it. So of course it's Shiva who drinks the poison. He's performing his dharmic role. The toxic material that emerges from the deep churning must be encountered, held, and metabolized by the one whose function is to transform through destruction. Through this, Shiva becomes blue-throated, permanently marked by what he's metabolized, but not destroyed by it. Perhaps the blue marking that he carries is there as a reminder to all of us. This is medicine for shadow work, for the therapeutic process, for anyone doing deep transformative churning. The poison you encounter is real. It needs a sacred container. It needs the Shiva function, the capacity to consciously destroy and transform what emerges, rather than to suppress it or to release it destructively. And sometimes this means that you'll need external support, a therapist who can hold the space, a ritual container, a community that can witness you whilst you metabolize what surfaces. Some work is too powerful, too volatile to do alone. You need a container, the skilled and dedicated holder, the sacred space where transformation can happen safely. Back to the story. Only after the poison is held or transformed does the churning continue. And only then do the treasures begin to emerge. And what an immense bounty of treasures come, way beyond what they had sought. And the sequence matters. First come symbols of abundance, the wish-fulfilling cow and the wish-fulfilling tree. nourishment, provision, and the capacity to sustain. Then come symbols of power and sovereignty, the horse, the elephant. And then the gem, the jewel of discernment, consciousness itself. And then the apsaras, beauty and creative inspiration. And then Lakshmi appears, the goddess of prosperity, of order, of cosmic abundance. And Lakshmi doesn't just emerge, she chooses. She looks at everybody gathered, the devas, the asuras, all who churned, all who faced the poison, all who witnessed the treasures, and she chooses Vishnu. She aligns herself with the unchanging ground, with the transcendent, not with the forces doing the churning. And perhaps there's profound medicine here for us. True prosperity, genuine abundance, lasting order doesn't come from the struggle itself. It doesn't align with the churning forces, no matter how hard they're working. It aligns with the steady foundation beneath, with the unchanging ground, with the part of you that isn't identified with the effort or the outcome, but simply is. When you're fully identified with the struggle, when you believe that you are your stories, the circumstances, the experience of life, only the effort, only the churning, then abundance struggles to find you. You are too caught in the tension. But when you're rooted in the steady ground, whilst still engaging in the work, when you have access to the witness beneath, that peace and perspective, that's when prosperity can choose you. And then comes the moon, Chandra, marking time, cycles, the rhythm of transformation itself. And finally, Dhanvantari emerges with the pot of Amrita. The divine physician brings the nectar of immortality, the thing that they had come here for. Both forces worked for it, both in their own way had earned it, but the asuras immediately seize it. And of course they did. This isn't villainy, it's their nature. They are the expansive, boundary-pushing, exploring force. They are driven by ambition and acquisition. That is their function in the cosmic dance. But notice, the devas were held to a different standard. One moment of carelessness, one instance of complacency, resulted in the loss of all of their power and this corrective ordeal. Different functions and different levels of power require different accountability. So the devas turn to Vishnu, and Vishnu becomes Mohini. Beauty so captivating that it reveals what was already true about each force's relationship to power. The asuras are entranced by appearance, by surface, by form. They cannot see past the enchantment because they're not grounded. It's their nature. And they are so mesmerized by Mohini that they don't notice that the nectar is only going to the devas. And this is exactly why they can't be given immortality. The asuras want the nectar for permanent dominion, for eternal conquest, for power that never has to face vulnerability again. Everything would become endless consumption, endless grasping that can never be satisfied. The story adds one more subtle truth here. One asura, disguised amongst the devas, manages to taste the nectar before Vishnu intervenes. He is beheaded but not destroyed, and his head lives on as Rahu, forever chasing the sun and moon, occasionally eclipsing their light. Even when alignment with Dharma is restored, the shadow doesn't disappear entirely. A part of grasping does become immortal, not to rule, but to obscure. The work of balance is never finished. And on the other hand, the devas, humbled by their defeat and desperate enough to work as equals with those that they had considered beneath them, receive immortality in order to restore cosmic balance. To continue their dharmic function, maintaining order, structure, and the ground that allows life to function. And this points to a truth that the story may hold for all of us. We need the asura energy within us, the ambitious, powerful, boundary-pushing, exploring part. We couldn't churn without it. That force is necessary for transformation, for growth, for expansion beyond the known. But we cannot give immortal permanent power to the ego's grasping, to the part that wants endless expansion, endless acquisition, and permanent gratification. Because if chaos becomes immortal, if the expansive force gets permanent rule, then it's not freedom or satisfaction that we gain. What we get is dysfunction, endless consumption, endless unresting movement, never feeling or having enough, no center, no purpose, no grounding. The Deva energy, aligned with Dharma, with balance, with maintaining the structures that allow relationship and function, that's what can be given permanence. Not because it's morally superior, but because it allows function, grounding, direction, meaning, continued transformation, continued life. Order must guide, but order needs chaos in order to remain dynamic, to stay alive, to keep evolving. The asuras are necessary. They push the boundaries, they test the limits, they explore what's possible, they expand the sense of what's conceivable. Without them, the devas become rigid, stagnant, unable to adapt or to grow. But the guiding force, the one that receives immortality, the one that holds permanent power, must be aligned with maintaining balance rather than permanent conquest. This shows up constantly in therapeutic work and in personal development. Many people need to recover their asura energies, their rage, their boundaries, their willingness to fight, their ambition, their self-interest, their drive, their dreaming. You cannot do transformative work without accessing those forces. They are necessary. But the integration isn't about letting those energies dominate. It's about using all of yourself for the churning, your order and your chaos, your structure and your possibility, your duty and your desire, while ensuring that what guides your life, what becomes immortal in you, is your alignment with Dharma rather than ego's permanent dominance. And perhaps this is medicine for our time. We live in a culture that valorizes the asura energies almost exclusively. Ambition, consumption, endless expansion, conquest, movement, seeking externally, almost boundless possibility. More is always better. Bigger is always better. Identity is king. Vulnerability is weakness. Accumulation is success. Power and independence is the goal. And personal freedom is the highest order calling. The whole system is oriented towards making the acquisitive impulse immortal, toward permanent expansion, toward consumption that never ends, never rests, never says enough. But the story says, use those energies, churn with them, they are necessary, but don't make them immortal, don't give them rule. Because despite what we have come to believe, chaos as permanent state isn't freedom, it's dysfunction. It's the endless grasping that destroys peace and relationship, that destroys the earth, and that can never rest. What does deserve permanence is our capacity to maintain balance, to work with opposition rather than eliminating it, to hold poison when necessary and transform it, to stay rooted in the unchanging ground whilst engaging in the work of transformation, to recognize that both order and chaos are necessary, but that order must guide if life is to function. The ocean is there within all of us. The churning continues. We are all still working with the tension between structure and possibility, between duty and desire, between what maintains and what expands. The poison is real and the treasures are real. And within each of us, beneath it all, the foundation quietly holds, steady and unchanging. Part 3. Integration Practices. The medicine doesn't come from understanding these patterns intellectually. It comes from the practices, from allowing the transformation to happen in your body and in your honest acknowledgement of where you are. Here are 3 practices to help you work with what this story offers us. First practice: where have you forgotten your responsibility? The story begins not with catastrophe, but with carelessness. One moment of complacency, and the order was already broken. This week, take 20 minutes with your journal. We are looking at power and responsibility, not in abstract terms, but specifically. Where in your life do you hold power? Through authority or knowledge, through experience or physical strength, financial security, social position, or relationships. In what ways have you become careless with that power? Not cruel, but complacent. Where are you taking for granted what you've been given? Where has comfort or familiarity made you less attentive to your responsibility with your power to others? And what would honoring the duty that comes with your power look like, specifically? Where can you use your power or your privilege for good? Explore these questions honestly. In this story, correction began with the sight of a sage, a carrier of wisdom. Second practice: finding the ground beneath the churning. Vishnu as the turtle doesn't churn, he holds, he supports, he provides steady foundation and witnesses from beneath. And we all have access to this place, to the part of us that isn't the story, that isn't the struggle, that isn't the circumstances that we experience or the identity that we maintain. But most of us rarely visit it. This is an incredibly empowering practice. Set aside 15 minutes in a quiet place at least 3 times in this coming week. Sit comfortably and close your eyes. Rather than trying to solve or process anything, simply gather your presence into your center, that place of deep connection and peace. And from that place, observe what's churning. The thoughts, the worries, the tensions, the opposing forces pulling at you, and acknowledge them, but don't engage with them. Just notice them as the churning happening in the valleys that surround you. And then turn your attention downwards, beneath all of it, and ask, what's here that isn't churning? Where is that part in me that is simply still, the part that observes without being disturbed? You may only glimpse it briefly, and that's enough. This practice is about building that connection with the steady center, even if just for a moment. Notice what it feels like to rest in that place, even briefly. Notice what becomes possible from there. Third practice: naming your poison. The churning always brings poison first. Before the treasures, before the abundance, comes the toxic material with the potential to destroy everything, and it needs a container, not a bypass. This practice is about honest inventory, not to wallow, but to name what's festering at the bottom that your churning, your life, your growth, your relationships, has been bringing up. Take 30 minutes and write at the top of the page, what is the material that needs to transform first? It might be rage, grief, shame. It could be fear. It could be a pattern of behavior that you keep encountering. It could be a truth that you keep avoiding. It could be the destruction of a structure that you rely on. It could be a part of your identity. Write it without minimizing it, without justifying it, without bypassing it. And then ask 2 questions. First, what would it mean to take this seriously, to treat it as real, potent, and in need of skilled holding, rather than suppression or explosion, in the same way that Shiva contained and transformed the poison? And second, do I have the right container for this? Is there a therapist, a trusted person, a ritual practice, a sacred space where this material can be metabolized rather than just managed? The blue throat that Shiva bears is a reminder. This work marks us, but it doesn't have to destroy us. The medicine in this story asks something of us. It asks us to hold power with responsibility, to find the steady ground beneath the churning, and to face what surfaces honestly and metabolize it with skill. It doesn't promise that the work will be easy or quick. 1,000 years, the story says. But the ocean is there within us. The foundation holds, and the treasures are real. The wisdom in these old stories waits patiently. I hope that this one's medicine found you where you need it. Thank you for listening to Story Medicine. I am Joe Summerfield. Until next time.